Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hope you can hear me well. Started a little late today, but I apologize about that. But we're gonna go ahead and get going. So today we got Subbook 2 in Memories of Ice, Hearthstone. Just to let you know on my summaries, I'll be using some of the summaries from the wiki when I'm going through the chapter by chapter. I took good notes like I usually do for most of it, but there was like a section there for a chapter or two where I didn't really take super detailed notes just because I wasn't in the right environment to be doing so. But we'll go along with what we have though. We'll make this quick, and I'm not gonna waste too much of your time. But just general thoughts on Subbook 2. I really enjoyed the subplots that we got and the things that we learned about the different characters. There were times when I felt like, oh, we're with this group maybe a little too much. Um, Probably the Gray Swords, if I was going to say anything, but I enjoyed every subplot overall, and even like the ones I didn't like the most, like probably the Gray Swords, was still interesting, in my opinion. We got a lot of world stuff from them and a lot of building, depth and world building for Kaputsan through the Gray Swords, so we learned a lot through them. So, going into it right away, book two, we start out and we get introduced to a new character called Carnatus. Carnatus, I swear, it's every time like my cat has to like demand something that immediately when I start. I'll be right back again. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. I don't know. My cat literally like it's on cue every time. He has to like bother me whenever like a book club starts. But just getting started. So the beginning of Hearthstone, we get introduced to a lot of new characters. We get introduced to the Gray Swords. We have Carnatus, who is sitting there. He's watching a storm that's happening in the distance, and then he's approached by the next character we get introduced to, Itkovian. Good morning, Daniel. Hope you're having a good one. We just got started. You haven't really missed anything so far. So he gets introduced to a character called Itkovian. And so they're part of a group called the Gray Sword, as we learn, which is in Kaputsan. The two of them start talking, and he lets Carnatus know that the Mortal Sword wishes to speak with him. So all these Gray Swords have like two names. So like they call them like stuff like the Mortal Sword or um, what is it? Shield Anvil is Itkovian's name. Carnatus, I don't remember Carnatus's, but we'll get there probably. um, but they all have dual names that they refer to themselves by in their little group that they do, and they're sort of like a mercenary group that works for the Prince Jackarol, or like, yeah, I guess that's what it is. So the Moral Sword wishes to speak with him. They go downstairs. Carnatus speaks with Bruchelin about Wrath Trake, the new tiger god, and basically we get a lot of stuff with that in particular. This chapter, a lot of focus on the tiger god. Yeah, Destriant, Mortal Sword, and Shield Anvil. Yeah, um, they like have their unique names. Destriant's the priest. Oh yeah, Carnatus is Destriant. Shield Anvil's Itkovian, and then Mortal Sword is Bruchelin. Um, and thank you for reminding me on that. So yeah, they talk about the Tiger God, Raytrack, and basically, uh, he's like the god of war from what we learned, god of summer, and they mention him in past or in this conversation. And then Brooklyn then sends Itkovian out of the room. Carnatus then pulls out an orb and it lights up. And then they see a man inside the orb. The man's asking them if they are the rulers or if they know the rulers. And That's where we learn Gray Swords are like a mercenary company. We then also learn that the man in the orb is Quick Ben. So he's doing his job that he's using, which he planted. Basically, we learn in the next chapter with them instead of making it look like an accident. But Quick Ben talks to them for a bit. Then he decides to tell them what Brood's message is and how Brood is bringing support against the Panions here. They then all decide to meet two bells from dawn to convene, and one of them also points out that they notice there's multiple souls inside of Quick Ben, as we learn. We then cut to the next scene where Quick Ben talks to Whiskey Jack about the call that he just had over the orb. He reveals how he pretended to reach the Gray Swords, like how they magically got the orb when it was intentional with them getting it. Nothing's really an accident with Quick Ben for the most part. And then the two of them now prepare for the meeting, and Whiskey Jack goes to tell Dujek and Brood about what Quick Ben found. We then cut to the next scene. We get introduced to a few other characters. So we have Outriders, Silas, Mikhailin, Terran, Farkalin, I think. I don't know. My handwriting's really bad. But Itkovian goes with two of his wings, which I guess are like battalions or squads, and they're following these mysterious tracks that popped up, and they're trying to figure out what exactly is going on with that. So they follow the tracks, and this is where they run into the Kachane Shamal, or Kell Hunters, I guess. From what I understand, you might be able to correct me, but I think Kell Hunters and Kachane Shamal are the same thing for that. But I'll call them Kachane Shamal for now. So the Raptor sword like things, the guys with the swords. So they run into them. They try to fight them off. They're getting like murdered, and they're about to die until, or they kill one of them successfully at first. They have a bunch of dudes die to it, but then they like chain like a bunch of lassos to it, and then they drag it away with like four war horses in different directions, and then pull its head in one direction, its legs in another, and like rip its head off like a torture thing. Like that Roman torture where they like stretch people. It's kind of like that. So they kill it, and then like more of them show up, and they're like, oh crap, we're screwed. Until the Talani Moss show up, the Talani Moss that are converging for Silver Fox, and they just like murder them in a second. Uh, and we learn the leader of the Talani Moss in this section is Pranchol. So we have that tie-in, Friends of the Moon with Pranchol, to now where we get to see him actually like in person in modern time, present time, I guess is the better term. Kell is a subspecies of the other, kind of like a warrior caste of species. Okay, got it. I'll try to remember that. It's like they kind of all like fuse in my head, the Kell and then the could change them all. So I'll try to like separate that now that I know it. It's like a subclass. Got it. So we have that like encounter. Now we have the whole Talani Moss army here to help out. Sort of. They're here for convergence. They don't really care, but they also hate the Panion, or they hate the Kachane Shamal, and so they're like, our job is also to wipe them out. So like we're kind of helping you at the same time, just because it's like coincides with each other, but we're not really like under your service. Um, so after that, uh, this is where we get introduced to like the Kell Hunters. And so Itkovian offers to send Recruit, which is one of the soldiers that's with them, like this one lady who's a recruit, back to the city. And she's like, no, I'm going to fight for them. You fought for our soldiers, and we're going to fight for them together. You can't just send me back. So he sends, or she comes with them. And basically, Pranchol decides that he's like, okay, we're going to use you guys as bait to kill these things. So you're going to go out there, tempt them. They're going to pop out at you, and then we're going to like burst up from the ground and murder them. Because if we're just there in an army, they're going to run away. But we could pick them off one by one if we use you guys as bait. So I'm like, okay, that's great. Let me be bait for you. This is fun. So they're going to be bait. And basically, they they're basically, what's it called? Let me just read this out. after he tells her that, they go to Pranch Hole, and we get some lore about the Kachane Chamal, their background. We learn they're like undead creatures, um, and uh, we also learn that like they're being controlled by a matriarch, is what it says, which I believe are the Kell Hunters, maybe. For that, they're being controlled by like a matriarch in their system, is what he like tells us. And then so Kovian then mentions the Panian seer to the Talon, and they reveal that the Panian is actually a Jaghoot name, which is interesting. And so since it was like, I'm like, okay, if we put this together, we got the Panian, it's a Jaghoot name. They're talking about a matriarch. So is like the person controlling the Panian the Jaghoot girl from the beginning? Possibly. I don't know, because we get the Panian seer later, who's all depressed. And we know the Cripple God has some influence on it as well. So we'll see how that like ties in with everything. But I thought it was a little interesting nugget that he mentioned it was the Jaghoot name. And since they hate the Jaghoot, they're here to help, basically, because they're racist against the Jaghoot. Which, I mean, I guess they have a history, but still. It's kind of like there's like three of them and there's like 10,000 of you. Is it really fair anymore? um, and then after all that, Itkovian is going to go hunting with the Emos and basically be bait. So let me just check in here. So, for the soldiers are issued armor for their flesh and bones, but they must fashion their own souls. Fashion their own for their souls, piece by piece. Okay. Sir, a single rider would do as well. You return the Capuzon to spare me. From what? From seeing Kachane Chamal cut to pieces by these Talani Moss. Shield Anvil. There is no mercy or compassion in your decision. Nope. None at all. And then we cut back to a familiar face. I really, really like the talk sections in this sub book that we get. Talk is becoming a very interesting character where he's some of my favorite sections to read, to be quite honest, right now. And I like the depth that they really brought him since Gardens of the Moon. So, Talk is just chilling alone. Baljag comes up to him, and the basically Baljag and the two weaker Segula are left with him at the camp because Envy and Mock are going off to run errands essentially. He's talking to Baljag and wondering like where Baljag came from, and the wolf like builds a connection with him and decides to link with him. Uh, and like through the socket in his eye, he starts getting like images basically of being like a lost wolf and needing to wait for the Talani Moss. And then they then break the link, um, and yeah, then they break the link that like the images that he's sharing, but he's getting like images of him being like the last wolf. He's waiting for the Talani Moss and stuff like that. And like he learns like sort of his past and gets a connection with him, and then they cut off that link, and then Tool shows up to talk to them. We get a little like Memories of Ice section here where he gives us like a quote about Memories of Ice, or he like name drops it as well. Yeah, the third time they're using Memories of Ice in the title for that. Yeah, and like you mentioned as well, we also learned that we're being tracked by like a yellow haired wolves. So we're being tracked by ITOG, but they remain shy. Curiosity may overcome them eventually. Talks gaze return to Baljag. Ancient memories, memories of ice. Yep. He also Tool gives Talk a new name as well. He calls him like Aro Fael. I don't know how it's pronounced, but it means like obelisk, which is based off the deck of dragons, the obelisk that was appearing in the deck of dragons. So I guess Talk is powerful enough now that he has his own card as well, just like how Perrin has his own card, and uh, like there's also its own card for the House of Chains as well. So we got a lot of new deck of dragons like coming up in this book for the importance. So the two of them, Talk and Tool he calls Talk the new name, the obelisk. We also learned that the Baljag decided to link with Talk. Also, um, Morn and Baron people. Oh yeah, we get some like we learn while we're in Morn, we get some backstory, Tool backstory. which is pretty cool. Um, where basically his brothers and family all died, and he failed his clan. He basically explains why he's like clanless um, to talk in this section, um, and why he is who he is. And basically, he committed the biggest sin of all time against his people, which is why he can never take a clan again, or he's clanless now because of committing that sin, failing to survive, I guess, and fight for them. Let's see. The name means touched by stone since he lost his eye to stone from Moonspawn. Got it. Yeah, Tool's just saying that the deck holds versions of the obelisk with stone. Okay, got it. That makes sense. Either way, Taki is still becoming an interesting player. Um, we then like cut to, I don't know if it's like a dream or like a memory. I guess it's like a dream that he has, or a vision he gets. That might be a better term for it. So, uh, in this vision, I thought at first it was Balljag's memories, but apparently it's Trake. Um, excuse me. So this was interesting at first because I didn't know what was going on. But in the vision, it's about a man named Treach. Treach was a man in wolf form, or I guess tiger form as well. Um, and he failed to kill a Kachane Shamal essentially. And he does kill it, but he starts dying because of it, and he's like bleeding out. And then up comes to him uh, a woman, a panther, uh, also the same woman that we see from the prologue as well. It's Kivala, I believe, or Kilava. It's Kilava comes up to him, Tool's sister, and he tells like her that he just wants to die. He's too injured to go back to his human form, um, and like he can't go back to his human form. And he's like saying these like interesting things. So it's like okay, maybe he's a soul taken since he could go back and forth from human to animal. And then basically the interesting part here that I thought about it was like when he was like sharing a soul with him and stuff, he dies, and basically when he dies, like Treach, it's like is his human side dying and Talk is taking over the human side, and he now has a connection to Trake through the god. I don't know. It is very confusing with it because I'm like, okay, so maybe his human form died, and Baljag is all that's left of it in wolf form. But I'm like, that doesn't make sense because this is Treach, so he's a tiger. So he's just getting the visions from. I don't know. I was really confused at this part, but like I was like, okay, so is Talk replacing his human form and gonna be able to do something with that eventually? It's interesting. And then after that, we cut to the next part. I'm gonna have to pull up the summary. This is what I mean. My summaries weren't as good this time, just because like there's a section here, like for this chapter, where I didn't get the what's it called? I didn't get to write it down because I wasn't in like a place with my notebook when I was reading. So let me just pick it up real quick. Yeah, so Talk struck by the vision. Okay, so they wake up Talk. Um, they give him his food, and Talk tells Tool what he saw and is unsurprised when a Black Panther arrives, which is Kilava, Tool's sister, who says she remembers seeing Talk looking out from Trake's vision through his missing eye. So this is like what I mean. Like, where is he connected to Trake now because of this vision? So Tool tells her that this new gathering of Talani Moss could be her chance to reunite with her people. Kalava scoffs at this and says she's going for a different reason to the convergence. The voice of an elder god then tells Talk that she goes to right an old wrong. The elder god further tells Talk that he intends on sending him into the Panian Seer's hands to help free those under his power, something he probably won't forgive him for. Kalava leaves, saying the meeting has given her hope. And then Talk reassures Tool, who promises to tell him about Adjic Lorne's death. The Segula call Tool and Talk over for a meal and call them Stoneblade and Stone Arrow. So they give him like a nickname, kind of like admiration for them. Interesting thing, talking to Tool, I really love their connection. Tool is just great. Like I feel like whoever he's like with, he just makes a friendship with, and they can't help but like him. As we know later, when we'll get to it, it's one of my favorite moments when Talk is talking to Envy, and she's like, "Oh, why do you care about like Tool or something?" I don't remember the exact context, but and then he's like, "I care about him because he's my friend." And then Tool just like looks back at him with his like hollow eyes for a second. He just like stares at him, and then he like looks away, like he doesn't know how to process that he has a friend. But like he's all for it. Like I really like Tool. Talk just got kicked out of the vision. We don't really know what happened to Treach after that vision. Okay, so we don't know if Treach actually like died or not technically. Other than that, he's been known to be in his animal form for a long time. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It was a little unclear like what exactly happened with Treach. So that makes sense. Uh so we get to the next section though, which is with Envy. Um and I just realized I need to grab my book. Just in case if I need quotes. Because we get some interesting stuff here with Envy in the next section. So Lady Envy's travel to the city of Kalos with Mock and Gareth. Upon entering the city, she finds inhabitants slaughtered. They think it's around like 30,000 people being killed. She makes her way to an old temple where she's contacted by um, Cruel Maul, but by a fleet of unhuman killers on ships. He refuses to name them, saying they have returned to the sea. Envy expresses her dislike of having to care for his unwitting servants, referring to the Segula and her difficulty in keeping them under her sway, especially Mock. So we learn Cruel's actually like in charge of the Segula in a way, or they're his like I don't know if creation is the right word, but like his servants. Um, so she claims that Mock can easily defeat Tool if he's allowed to challenge him as well, which is concerning. Cruel admits he didn't think the first of the Segula would send someone so highly ranked, but rather send several scores of low ranked initiates to distract the Panions here from the Malazan Empire. When Envy becomes petulant, Cruel reveals that all the Warrens used for sorcery, um, including the Elder Warrens Coreld Ghislaine and Starville Demelin, draw power from his blood, which comes into play later now that I'm thinking about it at the very end when one of the Warrens opened up and like blood just floods out into the world. I knew it was like an elder god getting injured. They didn't mention him by name, but okay, yeah, that's Cruel. That's injured. Got it. When literally is like a flood of blood coming out one of the Warrens. So Cruel says he doesn't wish to be a tyrant with his presence in the Warrens, but he is frightened by the cripple god. When Envy asks what he needs her to do, he tells her to take his servants into the heart of the Seer's territory, but to take special care of Talk the Younger. She leaves, but not before Cruel warns her against using her warren with the Panion Domain's territory, as his blood has been poisoned there. It says it is a poison Envy can defeat, but Talk the Younger cannot defeat. So interesting, the stuff that we get right there for it. Let's see. Darkness, then chaos, wild and focused power, a universe devoid of sense, control, of meaning. Entities flung through the maelstrom, lost, terrified by our birth of light, a sudden sharpening. Pain as of wrists, opened heat spilling force, savage imposition of order, the heart from which blood flowed, in even steady streams, twin chambers to that heart, Coruld Ghislaine, the warren of Mother Dark, Starville Demelin, the warren of dragons, and the blood, the power, now sweeping in currents through veins, through arteries, branching out through all existence, and the thought that came to her, then stole all warmth from her flesh. So, like, basically, he's confirming that, like, what happened with the Imperial Warren, which used to be the actual world, I guess, when Calor destroyed it all. And then when Cruel did what he did in the prologue to save everything. That's why his blood flows through all the warrens because of that. I don't have the full 100% explanation on it, but that's basically it for it. And then it says page 234. There was a quote um, that I had. Let me just check that real quick. I think it's about the crippled god. Two 34 at the 234 at the bottom of the page. Or is it 239? Yeah, 239, bottom of page. It says, crippled and chained he may be, Lady Envy, but this particular god is never so obvious. His games display a master's sleight of hand. Nothing is as he would have us believe, and his use of unwitting servants is as brutal as his treatment of enemies. Consider, after all, the Panian seer, know for Kalos, death came from the sea. A worn, twisted fleet, cold eyes, unhumane killers, seeking, ever seeking. They now ply the world's oceans. So it's just interesting with the crippled god and the Panian seer and like this mention of the sea. As we know, there's multiple other continents that we don't necessarily get to go to per se. Or we might, I just don't know yet. But a lot of stuff mentioned of the sea, which I know like it's not, I'm forgetting the term for like ocean stories, but we get like a lot of seafaring stories with the Esomont books, I believe. So maybe that has a tie in with that. So after this like moment um, uh, that we have here, let's see. We then cut to a new scene where we get Pranchol. I'm just going to use the wiki summary because I. So Carnatus is in a meeting with Prince Jalarkin, suffering headaches as his Denol Warren has been used up. Jalarkin looks haggard after his discussions with the Mass Council, who wishes to commit the bulk of their troops to a suicidal outpost. Jalarkin leaves after begging Carnatus to find him. Leverage. Carnatus and Brooklyn discuss what must have happened for Itkovian to require so much of Carnatus's warren when Itkovian's outrider Sidless appeared. She relays to them the story of the battle and their relief by unexpected allies. When she mentions emissaries from said allies, 3 Kron Talani Moss Bonecasters appear: Bek Okan, Bendel Home, and Okrolam. Sidless introduces them, pointing out their abilities as Soul Taken. Bendel Home steps forward and says that the Talani Moss did not come to seek a battle, but to answer a summons. Refusing to give details on the nature of the summons, Bendel Home simply says they might be of less use once the gathering is finished. Bek Okan questions Carnatus as to the nature of the Panian Seer. Carnatus answers that he is simply a mortal man with no glamour cast over him. Bek Okan thinks there might be someone in his shadows. The 3 Bonecasters leave. Carnatus and Brooklyn are left to discuss the new developments. 2 hours before dawn, with the arrival of Itkovian's troop imminent, Brooklyn waits in his room. He thinks on the events of the past days, starting with the communication with Quickben. He intuits that relieving Kaputsan probably isn't their primary goal, and that Kaladin's Brune army is probably much reduced after so many years of battle. He muses on possible exit strategies for his troops that would still honor the contract he made with Prince Jalarkin. Suddenly, a tall Jaghoot appears before him, introducing himself as Gethel, the Herald of Hood. This is pretty cool. Um, and so Gethel basically offers him like a deal with Hood, and as we know, uh, like the Grey Swords are against this, so is the Talani Moss, and the Talani Moss don't like Gethel because he's a Jaghoot, essentially, and so uh, it seemed the reason why he's offering it is because Hood can no longer contact Fenrir directly, so he sent Gethel to offer the Grey Swords this instead of just talking to Fenrir. Um, when Brooklyn mentions his contract, Gethel is contemptuous, saying that Fenrir is going to fall and that he should feel honored to be approached by Hood. Upon mentioning honor, Brooklyn slashes Gethel across the face with a broadsword. Gethel draws his sword, but before he can strike, the 3 Talani Moss Bonecasters appear on the edge of veering into the Soul Taken forms. Gethel's pulled through a warren before they can attack. Bonecasters compliment Brooklyn on his quick action, then disappear. Brooklyn cleans his sword, and then in uh, he cleans the sword in the flames of his Hearthstone. Interesting. Despite it being a sanctified sword with its power unveiled, he only sees ashes. Then we have Gruntle awakens near. Oh, that's a different section. We'll get back to that. So yeah, we get all that with Gethel, and we also get like a Hebrick mention when he makes reference to Fenrir being too occupied. It's because obviously the things that are occurring in Rariku is the reason for that. And we'll see the Gethel stuff's interesting with what happens later with the Alliance, I guess it can be talked about, or being the new herald of the House of Chains of the crippled god. So that's interesting what happens with that. Tell me, Shield Anvil, do undead warriors hold grudges? Itkovian allowed himself a private smile. You can ask that of the next Jack who we happen across. I wouldn't know, sir. Yep, they still hold grudges. They don't forget it. They live forever. Why would you forget it? And then lastly, the last part of the chapter, Gruntle, we learn Gruntle's alive. And so I thought he died, but no, only like Harlow died. But Gruntle lives. He was healed by Netok when Harlow died. Netok like was one of the gray swords that was with the group, and he uses powers to heal him. So like the timing of the Kachain Shamal and everything, I guess it works out with the timing. So when he's about to die is when they arrive and take care of it with the Talani Moss and then heal him. And the Grey Sword's also interesting with their warrant. A lot of their magic users are like healers, which is interesting. They have a lot of like sort of like a cleric, I guess. So it's like a cleric group, I guess, which would make sense. That's the end of the first chapter, chapter 7. Moving on to chapter 8. Let me just pull up the notes as well, just in case if I need them, because like I said, my notes are pretty bad for the first few chapters. The last few were pretty good though. Or back to normal, I'd say. In fact, we'll just use this for now since it's actually way better than mine for this chapter. So, chapter 8. The harder the world, the fiercer their honor. Dancer. So, this is the Gethel part we get where he is going to make a connection with the crippled god. He makes a deal with him, basically, because he gets kicked out of Hood being Hood's herald. I don't know if it's because he's weak, so he just like kicks him out, or if he just does it himself. But he basically becomes the herald of the crippled god now, and he just like wants to seek vengeance basically on those that would harm Hood's plan. Uh, so, this is where we also learn about the House of Chains as well. For that, and then after that, we cut back to Kaladin's Brood's camp. So we got Murillo, Cole, and Quickbend. They're all like talking with Krupp and playing like a game, and Krupp's losing. Murillo suspects Krupp has some kind of like sympathy with the bridge burner's table. Quickbend suspects he's cheating. Krupp throws several impossible hands, but he can't detect anything from his warren. Whiskey Jack laughs, saying no one will ever figure out Krupp. Corlott appears and then asks Whiskey Jack to accompany her to Animander Rake's tent. We get some interesting parts here with Rake and Whiskey Jack. They actually become friends, which is pretty cool. So the two of them go to Rake's encampment, and this is where we also like get a background with everything. So basically, let me just double check my notes. Yeah, so he goes to see Rake. Rake is like, they're just talking it up, and they're talking about Silver Fox and other things, and Whiskey Jack automatically brings up, he's like, so you want to know about Quickbend, right? And he's like, yeah, I do. He's like, yeah, I know. Here you go. Let me tell you a story. It's pretty long. You like, sit down, take a seat. Let's go do this. And he tells him how Quickbend was actually an enemy at first that they were tracking down, trying to kill. He was one of 11 mages and he was like the weakest to be the weakest, like scrawny one. Him and Callum actually. Um, and they were part of this like city in the seven cities that they were taking over when they were doing that on that continent. So they were chasing them down for multiple days, and each day it seems like a new like mage would die essentially on the pursuit, and they were able to make it all the way through the desert and finally get a hold of Quick Ben, and they noticed that he's the last one alive. But basically, what he did was absorb all the souls of the other mages into himself in like some form of like soul shifting to basically make him make himself the only one left. So he's like preserving their souls at the same time. So it was like a survival tactic. Um, and this is also where we get like it's basically the origin of like the bridge burners because we get like Fiddler, um, Callum, like everyone. Like Callum is like, I guess I'll get rid of the claw and join you guys. I'm gonna be an outlaw now in the claw. And then like Fiddler, he literally has like a fiddle at some point and like a special like little helmet that he gets, and there it's like how they become together. And then one of them even name drops like bridge burners at some point, like straight up says the term bridge burners, um, or that we're burning bridges or something like that. So we get their like whole story here with Rake, and then once we come back from that, Rake's amazed at the story. He understands why Quick Ben doesn't want to be like interrogated now. He tells Whiskey Jack that he's impressed with his defense of Silver Fox and that he won't move against her, and will instruct Calor to do the same. He promises he will repay Whiskey Jack's tail with another one of his own eventually. Whiskey Jack departs, and they became friends. Crone then talks to him, and he's like, "Is that a good idea?" Um, and he's like, "Shut up, Crone. You're annoying. No one likes you, Crone." Um, but no, he's like, "It's fine." Like because Crone's like, "You're just it's just gonna come to heartbreak. This always happens whenever you make friends with a mortal being. They always just die eventually." But he's fine with it. It's okay to have be friends with a mortal every once in a while. Um, After that, though, we then cut to like Mybe. She's going crazy again. Uh, so she dreams she's young, thinking this is a curse, not a blessing. In her dreams, she sees footprints and thinks that flesh and blood Emos have wandered into her dreams. She awakens in her tent, wishing to the spirits of the Rabbi to end her life of constant pain. She's just so like depressing. Um, Leaving her tent, Crump appears with a box for her. During an attempt to expand like the gaseous caves of Darujistan, chambers were found with altars of crude cave paintings. Upon these altars were copper adornments meant to look like flint. The adornments were made and worn by the spirits of the Rivi before they ascended. He tells her that wearing them will ease her pain. He leaves her to find something to eat, telling her to hold onto her faith and that her dreams are a gift from that faith. As he leaves, she wonders at the hope he planted within her, and again at who might have been with her in her dreams. Interesting section. I don't really ever understand her section. I feel like she just like sees a lot of weird visions and dreams like the whole time for that. I think the going back to the chat, I think the weakest part is something Callum is trying to convince the bridge burners of. Oh yeah, Callum's trying to like tell them like, hey, yeah, he's a weak mage. Like, forget about him. He don't you don't need to worry about him anyways. Okay, got it. So he's not actually the weakest. He just is trying to trick him. Got it. Okay. Let's see. Okay, and then after this section, we cut over to the Tisti Andi. Um, we learn like the Tisti Andi at one point had defeated the Cripple God. Um, and then Rake is like leaving. He's like, I'm gonna go see Solana. I can't, or Solana. I don't want to be away from her that often. So we learn apparently his mate is Solana. We also learn at some point from Corlot that Tistiandi they don't mate with each other. They just like when a Tistiandi is born, it just comes. Um, and but like they don't mate with one another. So Rake will take good form as a dragon is a mate with Solana, another dragon. Interesting, very interesting. um, for that, that was another interesting thing that we learned during that section. Um, so after this section, we cut back to Perrin's group. They're on their way to like the Barghast. Uh, so Perrin's company basically, like his whole group, we learn it's just like a funny scene with all of them. Like Ansi is stupid, is what we learn. Like really dumb, and we just get like a good heartwarming moment with all the bridge burners here, where we start to build that chemistry, and I'm starting to feel for the group. I'm starting to get all their attitudes and like who they are and like what they bring to the table. And I'm liking them more and more now compared to like what they were mentioned about in the first book. Um, Now it's like, okay, we got personalities for them now. So it makes sense. And it's like, after this section, though, we cut to Talamondis and Hood's Warren. And for my notes here, of course, the wiki crashed on me when I'm in the middle of it, but Talamondis, uh, he's like a little head that Quickben finds in the Warren, and he's tied up with like these wards. And so Quickben here's the story. We learn about the Barghast and the Talani Moss. The Barghast are like the Talani Moss that miss the ritual. Same with the Tblaki. They're like the ones that missed the ritual at the time. So the way they evolved are into the Tblaki and the Barghast separately now. So it's what the Talani Moss would have been. And so he, after hearing this story, he releases the wards on this little head for Talamondis, um, and we'll see the ramifications of that later. Okay, from here on out, I have better notes. It's just the first two chapters. My notes were pretty bad. So I noticed in the beginning section here, the excerpt that started chapter 9 said Eastleigh Monat. I'm like, is this like a character tie-in for Esselmont? Eastleigh Monat, Esselmont, like it's spelled pretty similar. Um, I don't know. I just noticed that. So we get talking Envy. They're traveling. They're talking about their plans. Tool and the Emos, and the Kachain Chamal shows up, and we get to see the Segula fight it and see how strong they are and how they take it down. Insane speed by both of them. Tool then, seeing this, he gets like the same attitude as the third, where he's like, I can't be challenged. He's like, I have to be the strongest. I'm the sword of my clan. I'm the only one left. Blah blah blah. I need to fight them. And so he goes to fight them, and then Envy's like, y'all need to stop this crap, dude. And she like knocks Mock out. She's like, no, bad boy, no, stay down, don't do that. And I'm like, okay. And then they're talking, and Talk says he doesn't want the Talani Moss. She's talking about like the Talani Moss ending with Talk, and he points out, he's like, I don't want the Talani Moss to end because Talk is my friend. And I was just like, oh, Talk, Talk, you sweet summer child, you sweet summer child. And so in the next section, they end up reaching this new area that they were going to. Envy uses her magic to disguise Tool and and the dog. Excuse me. Envy uses her magic to disguise the dogs. Tool goes away, and they go into this new territory. Here in the territory, they arrive at the village, and it was taken over by the Panion domain. They are the domain erected a temple in this like village, and after they erected the temple, they then killed all the citizens. Um, and they said it was the reward to kill them. They stuck them in hooks as well for display, so they have their like bodies hooked everywhere. And then we have like the crew talking to Cult, which is the like priest here. So they go to talk, or the head guy, the Seer Doman is what they call it. So he talks to the Seer Doman Cult, and we learn a bit about the Panion domain, how like sadistic and messed up they are. Like we learn like about the dead seeds as well, which is pretty brutal. Actually, the dead seeds might be in the next section that we learn, but like the whole domain is like creepy as hell. Um, and so uh, they think the domain's gonna kill them, so they're like, the domain's like, okay, take your rest and we'll give you a reward tomorrow. And they're like, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So they all go to like bed. Talk's then woken up to Balljag and Gareth slaughtering everyone like in a crazy way. I was like, dang, Balljag and Gareth can like go down. They're not just like regular dogs. They like murdered everyone. And Balljag has like a little connection with Talk, and he's like, I'll protect you. I'll protect you. You're my bro. So that's cool. We also see in the bathhouse like multiple people slaughtered, and Envy just comes out like spotless, and she's like la 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 la, like just chilling. Um, Basically, her and the Segula and the dogs just like murdered everyone. They didn't even need to. She is, and it's like, okay, Talk, what have you got yourself into with this? Um, it'll be interesting. We then cut to the next section. It's basically the aftermath and the carnage, and we learn that the Kell Hunters are coming as well. And then after that, we go and Talk and Envy then argue because Talk wants answers and he's not really getting them from Envy. And Envy's upset because he simply doesn't like comply. He doesn't like fall for her like everyone else does. Like, yeah, he's attracted to her, but he's not like falling for her whims as the others do. And then cutting forward, we learn the group we reach another temple, and this one's full of cannibals. So we learn the Panion domain is full of cannibals, the Tenniscoury. Um, and so like basically for this one, we also learn about the child of the dead seed. So basically, it's like a spider if you think about it. I'm pretty sure that might be where he got it from. So the husband and wife in this case, the wife kills the husband and then has sex with the husband, takes his semen, I guess, and impregnates herself from a dead body because it can still have sex after the dead body's dead. So it's like a spider. If you think about it, how a spider, the male will impregnate the or fertilize the eggs and try to run away to not get murdered. So it's the same concept. So that those are the child of dead seed, because they're coming from a dead body whenever they come in. So that is an interesting concept. Very dark, but very interesting. Necrophiliac woman, basically. So they're crazy. Um, so this time they don't get to go to bed. The mob instead like starts to attack them, and they're just murdering the mob. And then Talk decides he's like, I need to go in there and jump in there and be in the middle of it. So he jumps in the middle, and he ditches and tells Envy that he can pretend to be he's gonna pretend to be one of them and sneak back into the Malazan Empire this way through them. And Envy is pissed off. She's like, "No, you're not allowed to leave." She like pushes him with magic, and she's pissed, but she doesn't kill him. But she's like, "No, like you're mine, boy." And that's the end of the chapter. Pretty interesting stuff. I really like that chapter. Like the whole section. Like I said, the talk sections are great. Probably my favorite section of the book so far. Okay, starting chapter 10. So to start chapter 10, we actually go back to Buke and Gruntle. And this is after they're being healed. So Buke is filling Gruntle in on everything. What happened, how Harlow died, how Netok died. And he also informs him that he's still employed by Botcherlin and Broach. He's not leaving them. He still has like his mini suicide wish that he's going through with. We then cut to the next section where Buke is trying to convince Gruntle to join him in stopping Broach's killings. So we learned that there's been like a bunch of murders going on, and Broach is going out every night to do like experiments and kill people and do things with it, whatever his creepy self is like planning to do with it. So he does that, and basically Buke is saying, I'm going to stay employed with him because it's my job to stop him. I can't fight him because they're literally so strong they could kill anyone they want. And it's just a matter of time before they turn on either us or the Panion domain. So if we could keep them on our side long enough to where the Panion domain pisses them off, then we'll have them as strong allies to kill the domain. And so that's why Buke is doing this as like a way of keeping them as allies. But he's also trying to like thwart the killings secretly of Birch. We haven't got like those sections yet, but I'm assuming they're gonna be pretty nuts. We then cut to Hitan, who's wants a meeting. She's meeting with the Grey Swords. She's telling them that she wants to meet with the council to talk about like getting the remains back. Because I guess she learns that they have the remains. So she meets with the council. They want Hitan and the Barghast to defend the city. And basically she refuses. Everything gets heated with this, and uh, we learn like more about the politics as well. So we learn that Talani Moss will take care of the Kachin Chamal during the siege, and the Kel Hunters. And that's basically what we learn. And the humans will take care of the Panian domain, while the Kachin Chamal are going to be taken care of by the Talani Moss. Hitan then meets with the council and the priests, and after many arguments, the corpses, they reveal that they found the corpses in the barrows, and that the Barghast remains, it's the Barghast remains of their gods. The council then, talking with them, like agrees to give them back the remains, and then they're like, we want to talk to you, Ikovian. Ikovian refuses to give them assistance, and they instead have to speak with Prince Jekyll. They're trying to make a deal with Ikovian about the Grey Swords, but he's like, we're not going against your contract yet. Speak with Jekyll. He's who we're employed under. They then discuss Trake's death and the new merchants, Botchlin and Broach, who are there. And after the conversation, they bring up Hitan. They bring Hitan down under the building to get to the remains. From here, we cut back to Stani, and she's talking to Gruntle, and she's like telling Gruntle to apologize to Kuruli because Kuruli saved their lives. And so we learn about Kuruli's Warren and Elder God and how he used it in the situation. So during this situation, he basically shifted all their souls into his Warren so that like it looked like their bodies were just corpses. And once they could change them also of like living beings, and so they're like, we don't care about you anymore, and they left after that. And then that gave them enough time when their souls shifted back in for the Grey Swords to show up and heal them, basically. Ugh, my throat is parched right now. Sorry. So yeah, that's what went on with that. And so she wants him to apologize because of that. And so that's where they go to do that. We then cut back to the Grey Swords and Hitan. They find the remains, and it's now time to take them. And basically, she's like, okay, I'll take them, but we're not participating in your war. And so, because of this, the Grey Swords, Wrath Shadowed Throne, and everyone there, they like start to kind of panic. Destriant is ordered to talk to Quickben as soon as possible, and Ikovian, if needed, is ordered to sleep with Hitan and break his vows if it means convincing the Barghast to defend them. So I'm like, okay. So they're in a desperate situation, obviously. They also mention there being two gods of summer in this section, with Trake being dead, and then they mentioned something about like a new god of summer. So I don't know what exactly is going on there. Like I mentioned, the whole Trake stuff or Treach stuff is a little confusing. Okay. We're almost done, actually. We got a few chapters left, 11, 12, and 13. Let's zoom through these babies. Like I said, I got better notes now with these ones. So, scene 1 of chapter 11. We're back with Perrin's group. Minus Perrin. Perrin's not there. Trots, Twist, and Perrin are in the Barghast camp already. They're just laughing, having a good time. Spindle's gross. Apparently, the hair that he's wearing is his mother's dead hair. That's pretty messed up. And, like, you have to be pretty mentally unstable to be doing something like that, in my opinion. Pretty dark. And so, we learned that about Spindle. This group is basically the bridge burners, but they're not, like, they even say they're like the misfits of the bridge burners, because, like, Callum and Quickben and all of them aren't there yet, so they're, like, the weaker ones. They're not, like, the main guys, is the way they view themselves, with, like, Antsy and the rest of them. Ugh, sorry about the yawn. We also learned that if Trot loses his fight, they will all probably die. And we learned that Mallet and Spindle's warrens have been poisoned, so just once more confirming that the poison is running through the warrens, like how we learned before, and so they can't use their warrens, otherwise they can die. And also, Spindle can't use their warren because whenever Spindle uses their warren, like they get attacked by any creatures around them, so like squirrels start attacking them. So it's pretty funny. We then cut to the next scene, and Quick Ben is emerging from Hood's warren after he was in there with Talamondis releasing him. He's been poisoned because he was in there too long. Hood's warren didn't have as much poison as like the other warrens. It wasn't like as touched, but he is still affected by it, and so he's weakened from this. And so he basically believes that it's being done by the crippled god through someone like the Panion domain. He doesn't think it's like directly the crippled god, but he thinks it's being done through like the Panion seer, for example. Um, and so he comes out, and we cut to Perrin and Twist. They're in the Barghast camp, and they're talking about Trots being the last like of his people, apparently. So I guess all of his people are dead. He's the last remaining one, and his specific clan of the Barghast is like more pure-blooded than the current ones. So he has to lay claim that he is one of them by fighting. That's the whole point of the fight, to prove that he is of that clan and the last remaining one, the leader of that clan. And so because if he is, he kind of has authority over them because he's the most pure blood of the Barghast, basically. So that's what the fight entails, because it's a lot of big power dynamics, basically. So he's gonna have to basically fight the chief's son, is what we learn. Um, Perrin seems nervous during all this, and Twist like is like, "Are you okay?" And he orders Twist to do something, but we don't really know what it is at this moment. We then cut to the next scene, and Corporal. Uh, we get introduced to a new character, Corporal Aimless. Um, so basically, the fight is getting ready to start. And the clans are all here gathered up. We see all the clans show up with their different like attire and how to identify them. Parent talks to Aimless and makes sure that they follow orders, because Aimless is like, "Are you sure about this? Shouldn't we have like a way of getting out of this if we need to?" He's like, "You listen to me. I'll give you the word. I'll give you the signal if we want to do anything. Otherwise, shut up and pay attention." He's like, kind of like threatening him. He's like, "I'll kill you if I have to." And then Aimless is like, "Yeah, the last person that tried to kill me died. I murdered them. Are you sure about that?" "Huh? You sure about that?" And so he's like, Parent's like, just listen for the signal, okay?" He's like, "Okay." And he like goes away. I don't know. My Aimless is like psychotic to me. Sorry. But um basically the fight starts, and Trots is fighting like a Malazan, which they take note of. So he's using a shield and a sword. He's being patient. It's like he's in a phalanx, and he's just like guarding in the area. Um, he ends up beating. Oh, sorry. Sorry about the yawning. I was up all night finishing the chapters, ironically enough. He ends up fighting, and he ends up beating the son of the war chief. It's interesting how he does it. So like the son of the war chief stabs through like his shield at his arm, like gets his arteries and everything, and then he loses his hand. But he did that as a ploy, and he crushes Trot's throat. But like before he can get away, Trot slices his stomach open. So they're both like dying in the moment. But then when he's about to die, Mulch runs up to him and starts healing him. And basically, since the Warrens aren't able to be accessed, he stabs a tube through his chest, which is a real thing, to let his lungs breathe through the chest, which is something they actually do if you have a collapsed lung, they like in a way. So it's interesting getting that part of it, since that is something they actually do like medical wise to help someone with a collapsed lung, or not a collapsed lung, but like a broken esophagus. So all that happens. Oh, sorry about the yawns. I apologize. Perrin stops like everything from blowing up because like all the bridge burners are like they're like holding grenades. They're like, "We're gonna escape. They're gonna attack us." Like all the tensions are rising. He's like, "No, stop, you idiots! Shut up! I didn't give you the signal." And he's like, "Okay, fine." Um, and so he goes to meet with the war chief to get his decision. Um, and basically, the war chief is like, You're gonna have to wait for my decision. I haven't decided yet. You need to get control of your people though, and he gives him some advice on like being a captain and everything. Um, and he goes back to Trotz, who basically is being saved by Mulch, and they're like, "Yeah, we need Mallet. He's gonna die if Mallet doesn't show up and heal him with his Warren." Um, Basically, right now we're just holding him in like by his last like straws, like preventing him from dying. And so then in the distance, Twist arrives on his quarrel with him to get him. He didn't send him to get Quickben, he sent him to get Mallet. And Perrin then like emphasizes to like Aimless, he says, Perrin emphasizes he's like, no one is dying on this mission. No one. I'm like, good for you, Perrin. I like how you're becoming as a leader, even though you hate it and you don't like the job and you don't like the responsibility. I like Perrin. He's still like probably my favorite. Him and Talk are really like my favorites in this book so far. We then cut to the next section. Quick has reached the bridge burners out of the Warren. He's sick. He's struggling. And while they're going through like a Barghast barrow, like he senses like there's a lot of spirits around. He's like, I don't know what this means. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of roots like grab him and start pulling him down. And they're like, no, don't go away. And then he's like, let go of me or else you're going to rip my arm off. And he's like, okay. And they let him go. He gets taken into a Barghast Warren, as we learn from the spirits of the Barghast. And then the rest of the squad decides to wait for him a bit before they leave, basically. Cut to the next section, and we get Quickben's section in the Warren. So he's basically meeting the same spirit that he weakened the wards with, Tarmandus. And the spirit tells him about the remains that are in Capuzon, and he says, if you want the Barghast to fight, you need to tell them about these remains. You're the only hope for it. And he's like, okay, I can tell them, but like they won't pay attention. We need to like do something for Trotz. Trotz is the one that can do it. And he's like, well, I can't talk to Trotz directly. He's like, well, what if you can like go through one of our healers and then like do it that way? And he's like, that might do. So he makes a deal where he's gonna go through Mallet to heal Trotz and have Trotz become the leader so that he can tell him of the remains and they can use the Barghast forces in Capuzon. After that, we cut back to Mallet, who arrives. Basically, he he arrives, but due to his poison, his Warren like is weakened. He doesn't know if he could heal Trotz. If he heals Trotz, he's gonna die. Perrin is like conflicted because he needs Trotz to survive. And Mallet basically says, he's like, order me to heal him because if I don't heal him, we all die because they're going to kill us. Versus if I heal him, only I die and you guys can escape. So it's the more noble thing to do. And Perrin makes the order. This hurts Perrin. He doesn't like making the order at all. He like even turns his back on Aimless. Like Aimless like comes up to him at a certain point and like is trying to talk to him. And he's just like, I can't, bro. I can't. Ashamed. And he's just like, it's a tough decision. Sometimes you got to make those decisions as a leader when you're in a leader of a group, especially in war times. And so it's like something he just has to do, and he doesn't like it, but it is the reality that it is. So Malik goes to heal Trotz. He's able to heal him, but while he's healing him, his like soul is getting ripped apart from the poison, and he's like losing himself. And then when he's about to die, then the spirits come save him. Obviously, because Quickben just set that up, so it works out. Makes sense. It's not like a Deus Ex Machina. Mulch then tells Perrin that both of them live, and that Mallet also survived as well for that. And this sort of relieves him, but he's still upset about having to make that order. Mulch and Aimless watch as Spindle and Squad and Quickben all arrive on the scene as well. So like they're watching them while the rest of the bridge burners arrive to the camp. We then cut to Perrin, and Perrin meets with the chief, and the chief tells him like the rule is shaky and that it'll not help Capuzon because like he can only get like eight other clans to like fight for them, so it's like not really like even if he like did give him support, it wouldn't work. That's why he needs Trotz to live, because like he needs the extra support behind Trotz, but even then it's still shaky. He also gives Perrin some advice on being a captain. He's like, you should kill one or two of them, make them scared of you. I'm like, yeah, that works. Um, Funny enough, I was reading Art of War by Sun Tzu. I don't know how it's pronounced. And in Art of War, one of the first chapters in the notes is talking about like leadership. And one of the things that like Sun Tzu did, he went to an army where there was a woman army for this like emperor. And he's like basically saying, I can train any army. And he's talking to the women. They're not listening to him. He's telling them to do certain things. And they're like laughing. And he's like, okay, fine. He's like, he orders them once more and they're still not listening. And so he's like, okay, who are the two leaders? And they're like, oh, we're the leaders. And he just straight up like chops their heads off in that moment. And he's like, okay, everyone back in formation. Let's try this one more time. And then he like gives his orders and they listen this time like perfectly. So it's interesting tie-in that I see with that to what this war chief is saying. He's like, okay, so the war chief's like, kill one or two of them and it'll cause the rest of them to listen to you. So interesting tie-in. So after giving that advice to him, he leaves and then he finds Quick Ben asleep, calls Mallet over. Mallet's like, yeah, I could wake him up. He's fine. Wakes him up. Quick Ben's like, you asshole, that hurt. Why'd you wake me up like that? And then he informs him of the situation and Quick Ben's like, let me talk to him. We can fix this. Perrin, come with me. Trotz, come with me. Mallet, come with me. He's like, hell, like, Twist, you come with me too. Because apparently the Moranth are some type of ancestor to the Barghast, we learn. That's separated at some point, but they do have a tie-in because they do understand each other's language, which is pretty interesting. So we cut forward and we then go forward and we get Picker and Bland. There's like talking to each other at night about progress. Blen leaves and Spindle shows up and Spindle's like worried. He's like, we're all gonna die tomorrow because half of us are drunk. We're not gonna be able to defend ourselves in the morning. And then Picker's just like, bro, just chill, just go have fun. You know, he's like, you know, if you didn't wear your mom's dead hair everywhere, you'd probably like be able to like get a girl. And then and then Spindle's like confused by this, and he's like, Mom, what? I need to make Mom proud. I'm like, okay, Spindle, you're a little crazy, but it's fine. Um, and we also learn that at this point, Picker killed his father at some point. So we get a little backstory with that. He's like, oh, I'll kill them, like, I'll stab you in the eye or something and kill you like I killed my father. I was like, okay, that's dark. All the bridge burners have some type of like twisted backstory to them. Like, okay, interesting. Then at the next section, Perrin and Quick discuss like the results of the conversation they had. Basically, the old and new spirits are one again because of what Quick Ben did. And now the war chief will declare war for them, and the others will follow, knowing that the remains of their gods are in Kapuzan. Not that they have the information, there's a reason for all of them to go to Kapuzan to get the remains of their god. And that's the end of that chapter. We're almost done here. 2 chapters left, 2 short chapters. But yeah, that interesting. I really like this section. Like I said, Perrin's becoming a really good character for me. Or he was already my favorite from Gardens of the Moon. But he's just like solidifying himself there. And yeah, he still has issues. He's flawed. Like everyone's flawed in this world. But like, I still like what he's doing and where he's coming from when it comes to his perspective on things and like the struggles and mental issues that he deals with, because it's all sort of relatable in a way. So, chapter 12. We get introduced to a new character, Anaster, which is the first of very many notes. Basically, talk is it's him infiltrating the Panian domain. We learn that he was promoted to a lieutenant. For some reason, he doesn't even know why, but Anaster promoted him. And then Anaster has been like, tells Talk that he's been invited to talk to the Seer. And so he accepts and makes his way on over to the Seer. We also learn that like he's known as the Defier because he's not been eating other humans. He hasn't been partaking in the cannibalism. And so because of this, like they call him the Defier, and might be the reason he was promoted, but it's bringing eyes upon him. He can't be as incognito as he wants, but he's not going to cross a line. So he's literally starving himself. He's eating himself in a way. So it's still cannibalism if you think about it, because he's eating his own body through starvation. But He goes to talk to the seer. He talks to him, and we like learn a lot of like stuff about the Panion domain. We learn a lot about like who Talk is as well in the eyes of the seer and Malazan. And basically, by the end of the conversation, he forces Talk to eat flesh. He says it's venison from a deer. I think he's lying to him, but he like mentioned he's like, I know you're part of the wolf, and like wolf are adverse to eating human, which is why he's adverse to doing it as well. So he's like, I know you're part of the beast. You couldn't have gone away with it. And basically during this time, Talk starts to have visions. He sees through Balljag's eyes, like Envy and his company and Tool and everyone. They're in rough shape. Tool is so like beat up. He's never seen him beat up that way. He just like looks like rags and bones, basically, which he is rags and bones. uh, but when he comes back from that, the seer was able to know that he like saw the vision. He's like, "You just gave yourself away. Do you know if you hid for another day or two, you could have assassinated me like you planned?" He's like, "You fool! I'll kill you." And he's just like, now he's just torturing Talk, and he's making him scream in pain. And all that we're left with is like the whimpers of Talk, and he can't even like do anything anymore. And the end of it really reminded me of a story I read called "I Have No Mouth, Yet I Must Scream." Um, Let me see if I can find it. 379. Oh, here. Yeah, it reminded me of that story. It's like a short story from like 1989 or something. But he said, he had no breath with which to scream, yet the arms holding him felt his shudder and squeezed tighter. Soft whimpers filled the chamber, the twin voices of Talk and his captor. He had no breath to scream. The title of a wonderful short story you should read. I have no mouth, yet I must scream. So interesting development there. Uh, and that's the end of the chapter. So poor Talk. I feel bad for him. Talk is like one of my favorites now that we're here, and it sucks to see him going through this. And it's his own decision, but it's either he did that or he fought with Envy and all them. He's the weakest, and so it's just like protect the president at that point. Um, but yeah, we cut to the final chapter. And so we have Maib, who's going crazy. She's having dreams of despair, death, abyss, and like a bunch of crazy things. And like there's also things that in her dream she's calling her enemy, which I don't fully understand. We don't really get clarification on either. After her like dreams and she wakes up, Whiskey Jack talks to her or is trying to talk to her about this, and she like shuns him. She's like, "Stay away from me, isolation, isolation." And like he's like, "Oh, apparently Silver Fox is isolating herself too because she doesn't like what's happening with her mother, and it's like hurting her because she wants to be with her mother even though she's killing her, and she has resentment." Tough situation. Um, because of all this, and so she shuns him and she falls further into herself from this point. A lot of weird stuff happens in this chapter that I can't quite explain. Whiskey then talks to Carlot about Maib and Silver Fox, and they both are in like, and like what the solutions they want to have like for it are. Sorry, I got a lot of yawns this morning. I got barely any sleep, but that's the first thing I'm gonna do is like knock out once I finish this. But yeah, so they talk about the communication with the outside world, how it's been cut off. They can't talk to Quickben. They don't know what's happening about Capuzon. They don't know what's happening with Perrin. Like, they just don't know anything because the Warrens are being messed with. And so basically everything's turning to crap. Whiskey then decides to seek out Silver Fox, and he leaves. When he leaves, I literally, for this next section, I'm like, I don't know what happened here. Whiskey goes to meet with Silver Fox and sees two Malazan guards and starts talking to them. They're like, "Yeah, we're going to defend her because she's Tattersell. She's one of us. So we're going to defend her with our life if we have to." And he's like, "Good for you guys." And he like connects with them. He's like, "Look at this bite. Like, I can relate to you. We both have scars. We've both been through struggles." So he's a good leader. We get more from Whiskey Jack. He then approaches Silver Fox. They talk about like a lot of stuff. And then while they're talking, basically a bunch of warrens, a warren opens up, and like we see like carriages being flooded with blood. Blooded, like a river of blood just like falls through all these warrens. Now tying it into the previous thing where like the blood is part of Cruel, it makes more sense because they said the blood's from an elder god, so it's probably Cruel's blood from the poison and the wounds that he's like receiving out of this. So he just like floods their camp with like a river of blood. I'm like, okay, that's dark, really dark, but it is what it is. We then cut to the next scene where we get Gethel, and he's talking to Calor. So he invited Calor to become the king of the House of Chains. And Calor accepts, of course, because he's a little rat. And he's gonna betray all of them. And he's like, all I want for you is to give me an opportunity to kill Silver Fox. I just need an opportunity. That's all I want in return. He's like, okay. And you'll be the king of the House of Chains. And he's like, how's this throne look? He's like, perfect throne. Let's do it. So we got a little evil rats that we know about now. And then lastly, we cut to Whiskey Jack, and he's talking to Carlot, and the two of them admit their admiration for each other, how they've like always been interested. And we get some interesting stuff here as well, where we learned during the war with the Tistiandi, they were growing compassion towards the Tistiandi and respect towards them because like the things that would happen whenever they would take in prisoners, they would heal them right away, they would treat them nicely, and so they started doing that in return in the Malazan Empire, and they would like bury the dead for both of them and honor them, and so there was a lot of like respect built up towards one another despite them being warring factions. And Carlot confesses her love for him, and he's like, don't you want to be with another Tistiandi? I didn't want to like stick my head in with that. And she's like, well, we actually don't procreate with other Tistiandi. We do it with other species. We don't like each other, basically. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Um, and so they go and they fall in love into their little tent. And then the last message we get is Maib. And she dreams of the same undead dragons that we saw probably in the dead house and also in the warren, the wounded warren, where the Solanda was found. So that's interesting. And then she mentioned something about Krupp as well. A lot of confusing stuff around that, but then it ends book two, which is a good ending. There's a lot like I feel like not a lot happened. It was like the setup for Capuzon's politics and the siege, and then like other stuff happened, but like we get good development with like Talk and Perrin and everything, and it's setting up to be good. I really liked it though, despite that it being a setup section. So that's basically it though. With that, so we'll go ahead and go into the section for next week as well. I believe we're splitting it. Let me double check the Google Doc that we have here. Yeah, so for book 3, February 3rd, we're going to the end of chapter 17 on this one, so I'm going to write it down. Yep, so we're going to the end of chapter 17, so we're splitting book 3 and we're splitting book 4 because they're a little bit larger. So yeah, we'll get to the end of chapter 17. Overall, my thoughts on book 2, pretty good so far. I like how it is. It's being set up. I'm not expecting a lot out of the first beginning books with Malazan because I know it's with epic fantasy. You have 1,000 pages to get through, so you got to set up a lot of things in the first place. So I'm excited to see what happens, and I know there's crazy moments ahead, super sad moments, and I can't wait to see what exactly they are, and if they break me, make me cry, and make me fall in love with the series. So we'll see. Other than that, though, thank you all for watching. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day. I'm going to call it here because I need to take a nap because I stayed up for 4 hours finishing the chapter last night. Other than that, though, it was a good time, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.